Harp's House. In your eardrum. Man, wherever you want me to be.
You're now listening
to Harp's House. Good morning, everybody. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and you're again here at Harp's House. We have a special guest in the building, Brother Damien Sojoyner. He's a assistant professor at the University of California, Irvine, and the Department of Anthropology. And I wanted to bring him on because he has a special relationship to a special topic that's been in the news a lot with our election and everything. And Damien, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, Jonathan. How you doing?
I'm good. No complaints. So I know you wrote a book. It's called First Strike, and it examines the relationship between the educational system in California and the prison system in California. Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct.
So for my viewers who are thinking like there's a direct relation, kind of break down what made you want to write the book.
So I guess what it was that when I was at high school, and we both went to the same high school. Shout out to Long Beach Poly.
Yes, sir.
When we were in high school, it was sort of an odd situation where there were several sites of security. You know, like when you checked in, you just like show your ID.
Right.
And there was campus sort of safety security around campus, and then after school, I believe it was the Long Beach Police Department would be there as well. And the school, I don't remember, had that big old gate.
Yes.
And then the gate had, on one half of the gate had like barbed wire fence on it, and then around the whole parking lot there was a big giant gate. And I wondered, like, why and how did all this happen?
Right.
Sort of like in hindsight, that's one thing, right? And how is it that in some neighborhoods, like, there's no gate, there's no fences, you can just go and come as you please, there's no security. So just as a pure sort of superficial look at it, how is it that schools, in particular in black areas, became so, for lack of a better word, militarized?
Okay.
So heavily. And it's often sort of sold under the auspices of like public safety.
Right, exactly. Like you said, you want to keep the kids safe, right?
Keep the kids safe, right? That's all that it's about. However, I think, one of the big things that we have to reevaluate that word safety and what safety really means and how we understand it, because most of the studies show that, in fact, when you put cops on school campuses, issues of safety and also school performance of students goes down for a whole host of reasons. And what I mean by like redefine what that word safety is, safety by and large comes from when you have steady employment, when you're going to have housing, when you have food on the table. That is what creates safety. Okay. The other sort of things that we think about of safety, with calling the police all the time, those things are sort of an illusion of safety, and not really what safety is. So in many ways, our understandings of safety have created an environment where schools have turned into sites of containment, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
And much of this predates what we would even think of being like prisons, so that the buildup of schools in this manner occurs before the explosion of prison in California. And I say California because California has the largest explosion of prisons in the history of the world in a 20-year period. That's documented by scholar Ruth Wilson Gilmore in her book Golden Gulag. Between 1970s and 1990s, the explosion in California prisons is astronomical.
Okay.
But this explosion is predated by this particular formation of containment of black schools in California. So in many ways, this model sort of gets worked out in schools first, and then it's taken to a much bigger level of prisons.
And when you say a site of containment, what exactly does that mean?
So it means literally of where you can go, how you get there. So what it has to do with metal detectors, what it has to do with campus safety, issues that, if you look like you're going to get into a fight in many schools, like just the actual looking like you're about to get into a fight.
Right.
Most of the schools now, have some form of policing on campus, like formal policing beyond just policing by school safety officers. Either there is like an LA County Sheriff or some city jurisdiction office on campus, and they'll issue a citation, and that citation for looking like you get into a fight, that citation is going to come with having to go to court, having to pay court fees, oftentimes be a misdemeanor offense.
Wow. Just for looking like you're going to fight.
Yeah, just for looking like
wow.
You're going to fight,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then, like you said, once you're kind of in that system and in that rut, like you said, of paying court fees and things like that, it's hard to get out of it.
Well, yeah. Then it becomes a system of just like straight up debt, because it's impossible. And in California, that actually follows you through the DMV. Right. So you can't even get your driver's license if you don't pay off these fees. That's fine.
Gotcha.
At all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when you, like you said, when you initially started thinking about writing this book and diving into this research, what was the feedback from people around you who you kind of bounced these ideas off of?
Most people I talked about it were like, duh.
Oh, really?
Sort of like, yeah. Like like everybody sort of understands, because there's a common understanding of this phrase called the school to prison pipeline. Okay. And so that's where most people went with it. And actually argue against that in the book for many of the reasons that I stated before, which is not that schools are preparing students for prison, which is sort of this linear trope of the school to prison pipeline, but it's rather that schools themselves already function in that capacity and have functioned for a long time in that way. So we need to rechange our analysis with that regarding the school to prison pipeline. But then also, we really have to figure out, what's going on in schools, both in terms of the discipline aspect of the formal discipline aspect dealing with the police, but then also what's happened with the curriculum as well. I mean, it's just been completely eviscerated, like it's horrible. Students aren't learning anything, and it's not because they don't have the ability to learn. It's what's being taught, and it's not because that there's a whole bunch of bad teachers in there. It's what's come down so often from the federal level or the state standards, which have to be in line with the Fed level, which are just demeaning, baseless, and don't do anything. And this is probably most readily seen with No Child Left Behind, which was a failed model in Texas. There's so many researchers already came out in Texas said this model's not going to work, and it was exported throughout the whole country, and it created just like a system of dumbing down and failure across the country, but in particular in black schools, because you had to pass these tests. If you pass these tests, then your schools will be stripped of funding.
Did you get a chance to look into like other school districts across the country where people of color are predominantly in, or did you pretty much just focus on, like you said, the California system?
So the book is focused on California, in particular in Southern California.
Okay.
However, you can see similar patterns of what happened with school districts across the country in black areas. And I say that because this was sort of the taking off of charter schools, which because of No Child Left Behind was directly attached to charter schools, so that if your school didn't pass a state test, then a charter school could come in and take over certain aspects of the school or the whole school as a whole. And that was sort of done in bits and pieces, and then it was most famously done as a model to see if this thing would really work across a whole district level in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina, where all the teachers were fired, and the whole district became all charter.
Right.
New Orleans probably at that time had the blackest school district out of any school district in the country.
Okay.
So it's not by chance that it happened there.
Gotcha.
And so, so that's a sort of a little bit of a tangent, goes in a different direction, but the two, are No Child Left Behind and charter system, are intimately connected together.
Gotcha. We're going to take a step away for a second and let it breathe, and we'll be right back. We're back with brother Damien Sojoyner. He wrote a book talking about the direct relationship with the prison system in California, along with the educational system. And Damien, we touched on it a little bit in the first part of the interview, but What's been the response from some of the people that you interviewed for this book? What's been their feedback?
I think by and large, it's been fairly well received.
Mm-hmm.
I say that because it's sort of damning of the school administration and the school district. Damning only in the sense of it's part of a larger state structure, not necessarily of people tied to it. So it's more or less been well received. The students really liked it.
Gotcha.
Telling their stories.
Right.
But, it's sort of that...
so you did get a chance to speak...
I'll say this.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'll say this, that one of the things I try to do in the book, and to make very clear, is that I'm not trying to go after any particular teacher or any particular administrator at all, because I don't want the book to be read in that kind of a way. Because this is not a book about horrible teachers or horrible administrators.
Right.
It's more of a book about what happens when you put in place a structure that is sort of failed by design. And the people who are operating within that structure have limited means at their disposal to be able to operate, because you're sort of bounded by these restrictions.
Right.
And sort of that's the overlay of the stories that are told.
Do you think some of the school districts in, like you said, Southern California, do you think they're going to try and make some changes or kind of update some of their policies to address some of these issues that you brought up in the book? Have you had any conversations with them?
I mean, like there are small reforms that are on the table, and I can't even say that it's a result of my book because of that. I mean, I think these reforms have been in the making for a while. Right. So there's nothing necessarily attributed because of what the book did,
right,
with what's going on with these reforms. I think overall, what needs to be done is a wholesale change of education, like completely a new model that's developed now. With the person that Trump picked as his Secretary of Education, I don't see that happening at all. Matter of fact, it's going to be much more of a punitive style that's going to come down the pipeline.
So what made you say that?
Just based upon her background. She comes out of Michigan and completely gutted public education in Michigan, tried to turn the whole thing into sort of a charter-based network, and school funding just got slashed a whole lot. And she has no experience in education other than being a part of a lobby group that sort of lobbied for charter schools. But other than that, she has no experience. She's a business person. In most instances, when you have business-minded folks who come in education with no experience in education, they come in with the mindset of just trying to cut and slash and burn the budget as much as possible.
Right. And
that often produces an environment where you're going to have minimal resources, and with minimal resources, you're not going to have anything that the students are going to be tied to. So you're going to see gutting in band funding and public art funding and sports funding. And so there's nothing that's going to be there to tie the students to the school, in addition to cutting of just basic resources needed to teach English, math, foreign languages.
Right.
And so it's just creating a sort of a landscape that's going to be ripe for disaster.
So, like you said, you do have a pretty heavy background in education. Could you talk about, like you said, the importance of some of those non-traditional aspects of school, such as, like you said, your arts and your athletics, how important they are to the maturation of, like, our youth, basically?
Man, it's vital. It's so vital. I mean, just take, like, music, for example, and you think of all the musicians who sort of came up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. A lot of them, and when I say musicians, I'm talking in particular like black musicians, came up, and that school experience was important because that's where they got sort of like the first formal training in music. And that's not necessarily even like reading music, but to be able to have an instrument, to hold instruments, to play instruments.
Right.
And folks learn in various ways.
Right.
And the ability to play music, to be expressive with music is vital in assisting both children's confidence in terms of being able to express but then also socialization, like so much is done that way
Right.
as well. And it just allows you to see the world in a completely different lens. It's not like it's a hands-on activity, right? Whether it's performance art, whether it's fine arts, painting,
Right.
drafting,
Right.
sculpture. Yeah, you're actually able to do it
Gotcha.
as opposed to like just read it and then spit it back out on a test.
Right. Gotcha. So, like you said, you do have experience in the college setting because, like you said, like I said, you're a professor at the University of California, Irvine. What's been your experience there so far with the university and your students? Like you said, with your book and just from what you've experienced so far.
The experience there has been pretty good. I have a great department. I'm in the Department of Anthropology there. I have great colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
So far the book just came out in October, so there hasn't been a lot of discussion about it. Usually how this works, it takes about a year
Okay.
for sort of people to get the book in their hands and then read it, and then there'll be more discussions about it.
Gotcha.
So we really haven't talked a lot about it. I've taught a few classes on prisons and public education, and the students have been great. They really gravitate towards the material, and they really begin to think critically about it in ways that I didn't even anticipate as well. So folks have been really open to the discussion, and it actually speaks to a lot of the students' experiences, because at UC Irvine, the vast majority of students I've had at the undergrad level have come from public schools in California.
Okay.
And so it really speaks to their experience in school. At least that's what they tell me.
Gotcha.
So that's been both rewarding, but then also very damning, because you wish that wasn't the case.
Right. Have you found that, like you said, a lot of the experiences that your students who have come from, like you said, the state of California versus outside states, is it very different, or is it pretty similar?
I would say the vast majority of my students at Irvine come from schools in California.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, as we're talking, I can't even recall students coming from outside the state. Not that they're not there. The students at my classes are.
Right.
Now, I taught at Scripps College before, and I had a lot of students who came from private schools, and their experiences were vastly different. Private schools from outside the state of California. Virtually none of them came from California.
Right.
And their experiences, it was all brand new to them. They had no idea this was going on at all.
Right. Wow.
They were just a different experience,
Thanks for sticking around to Harp's House. I'm your host, Jonathan Harper, and again, I'm with Dr. Damien Sojoyner. He's a professor at the University of California, Irvine, and we've been talking about the prison system and the educational system in the state of California. And Brother D, I want to ask you, I listen to The Breakfast Club a lot. Drop one of Clues Bombs for The Breakfast Club. And Brother Mark Lamont Hill was on there a few months ago when he was talking about the possibility of Trump coming into office, and he was saying that he would rather have Trump in office to have a complete breakdown of, I guess you would say, the system as we know it, because it's not in place to help people of color. He was saying the system is working exactly how it should be. So what are your thoughts on that notion?
Yeah, so I think it's real complicated. And I think there's several layers to that. And I understand what Mark Lamont Hill is definitely saying. And I think, without being able to speak for him,
Mm-hmm.
but I think part of it, this part where I definitely agree with him, is that there's the illusion that the liberal trappings of government through reforms will be able to save black people from state violence, right? And what I mean by that is that when you have police killings and defunding of schools, defunding of hospitals, that you can just sort of have a little reform here and a little reform there. And if we can just, support the Democratic Party and their quest to do whatever it is and just beg for sort of reforms along the way, that good things will happen.
Right.
And that's not the case. Like, that's not how social change happens.
Right.
At all. And having someone like Trump in office will sort of make that very bare and very plain. And not only that, but what I think it also reveals is the sentiment from across the nation of how people really feel. Mm-hmm. And so even though Trump got smashed in terms of the total vote.
Right, the popular vote, right.
I think at last count, he won over 2 million more votes than he did. There was still a sizable population that voted for him in light of everything that he said, which means in large part that they felt that way.
Right.
Or they were able to ignore certain things or whatever, right? So we still have to deal with that. So even if Hillary had won the Electoral College and won the election, there still is the issue that you have this sizable population in the country that still feels this way for whatever reason, and that wasn't going anywhere. It was just going to keep on festering, right? So in a certain way, now that Trump is going to sort of ascend, what we think, I'm not sure what's going to happen with these Electoral College process come next week, but that we'll be able to see simple and plain what it is that we're up against, which in many ways we weren't, because we had the illusion that something great was going to happen. When it never was. Like that was never the case at all.
When you say something great was going to happen, what do you mean?
Like there's not going to be, if Hillary came into office,
she's not going to save us all. Right.
Yeah. Like, black schools weren't going to be funded.
Right.
Black hospitals weren't going to be restored at all. And I said black hospitals in black areas, which have been closed, weren't going to be reopened. Healthcare and all that, issues of that. Employment was not going to just jump back off the board at all. And in certain ways, when that is the case, it prevents people from being able to really rally and organize in certain ways. Now, the scary thing about it is that if folks weren't already ready to organize, you have to be right now, because what's about to come down the pipeline is something pretty serious and pretty heavy. So the people that he's proposing to put up to run these positions at a federal level are going to have grave consequences for state mandate. So Jeff Sessions being in power is going to be, just awful in terms of policing and in terms of issues of border security, quote unquote. I mean, we're about to see stuff that we probably for our generation
took for granted,
have never ever experienced.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, so what's your prediction or forecast of the next 4 years then?
I think it's a moment of great change and a possibility of great change. I'm actually looking forward to it in an optimistic kind of way, which is that I think we can now begin to address some serious issues which have sort of been just put on the back burner for a while, and stuff can be laid plain as to what it is. Gotcha. It's going to be an uphill fight for sure. I definitely do think that. I'm really concerned for folks who live sort of in desolate areas. My law friends live in the Midwest, and when I say Midwest, not like Chicago Midwest, but like Kansas Midwest. I'm concerned about them because sort of now it's just open season on people, so folks have to be very vigilant about theirs. And I'm concerned about the economy, where it's going to go. But on the flip side of that, I really think that it's primed to have a massive sort of social transformation as well. Like that's a good possibility that can happen.
Gotcha. Well, Brother Damien, I appreciate you stopping by the house and talking about your book, First Strike. Well, all my listeners, make sure you go out there and cop it. Where can we find your book, D?
You can find it whenever fine books are sold. So you can find it in Amazon. It's at Amazon, Borders. I think it's at Target.com. I was surprised someone told me that. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, if it's not at your local bookstore, you can ask them. They can definitely order it if you want to go into a bookstore. Okay. And it's also available through the University of Minnesota Press as well, through their website.
And again, that's First Strike, Educational Enclosures in Black Los Angeles. What if they want to read some more about your work that you've worked on previous to this book? Where can they find some of your published work at?
Most of it is articles. I have a website. If you do a Google search, I don't have the URL on top of my head, but if you do a Google search and type in Damien Sojoyner, UC Irvine, it'll take you directly to the website with a list and the links to the articles on there.
Say that one more time for us. So if somebody didn't have a pen, say it one more time.
Damien Sojoyner, UC Irvine in a Google search. Then there's a link to my website, and you can find all the information there.
All right. Well, thanks again, brother. I appreciate it. And thanks again, everybody, for listening to Harp's House. Again, for all your needs, all your wants, all your questions, you can reach out to me on Instagram or on Twitter. I am Harper. That is IamHarper. Again, if you want to email me, it's harpshouse1@gmail.com. Thanks again. Take care.